Italy's Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni is in Washington for talks with President Trump at the White House. Meloni was the only EU leader to be invited to the president's inauguration and hopes to act as a mediator on tariffs. But the right-wing leader faces a delicate balancing act in pressing EU interests as Trump adopts an increasingly anti-European tone. And for more on that, I can now talk to Riccardo Alcaro. He is an analyst with the Italian think tank Istituto Affari Internazionali at the Institute for International Affairs. He joins us from Rome. Now, how much influence do you think does Giorgia Meloni have in Washington? Can she convince Donald Trump to make concessions?
Well, I can't say whether Giorgia Meloni has indeed any strong influence over Trump. What she has, however, is something only a few other European leaders have today, which is the ear of the president. She can speak directly to the decider. And on the tariffs, like on anything else, right now in the United States, if you want to have a measure of certainty, you have to speak with the top leadership, with Trump himself. Whether she can also persuade him, well, that's another matter.
Now, how important is it domestically for Meloni to soften Trump's stance on tariffs?
Well, if she were to come back from Washington with at least like an open pledge by Trump that he is willing to engage in a negotiation over tariffs with the European Union, because let's not forget that it is only the European Commission that has the legal authority to negotiate about trade. If Meloni were to do that, that would be a concrete, substantial outcome of her visit. And there is no way she can undersell that to the Italian public. She would be presenting herself as having been a pragmatically oriented leader who knows where her country's interests are and that has done the hard work to talk with such a difficult man like Donald Trump and convince him of the merit of at least engaging in talks. But we don't know whether that will be indeed the final outcome.
Another important topic expected to be discussed is Ukraine. Meloni is closely aligned with the rest of Europe on the defense of Ukraine. How does her position contrast to that of Trump?
Well, look, Meloni came out as a strong, staunch supporter of Ukraine at a time in which she needed to gain international recognition and credibility. And she rightly calculated that the best way to do that was to double down on the support the previous Italian government, led by Mario Draghi, had been given to Ukraine, not least, actually, this was the real reason. The US administration of Joe Biden was very much in favor of that, and she was able to build a positive relationship with Biden, with the United States, and gain a lot of credibility. Now, she has a completely different president to deal with. But look, Italy will continue to support Ukraine rhetorically. Practically, Italy's support hasn't been really that much. And she will try to transition smoothly from a position of support for Ukraine to a position of support for an agreement or for a sort of a framework agreement that Trump may be willing to contemplate if this framework agreement does give some sort of guarantees to Ukraine. If it doesn't, well, she will have to revise her plans, because she thought probably that Trump would not be as harsh on Ukraine as he has been so far.
Now, many Italians, a majority actually, see Trump unfavorably. Many think he's a threat to peace. How much of a balancing act is Meloni's alliance with Donald Trump? Briefly, if you can.
Well, it's kind of a balancing act, but you have to take account of the fact that, especially in the center-right electorate, which is the electorate she panders to, there is broad recognition that the United States is a superpower, and it is better to have good relations with a superpower than not to have good relations with a superpower, so they appreciate the pragmatism of it all.
Riccardo Alcaro there in Rome for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Leo Goretti is from the Italian think tank, Istituto Affari Internazionali, the Institute for International Affairs. He joins us from Rome. Welcome to DW. In recent weeks, much has been made of the idea that British Prime Minister Keir Starmer could act as a bridge between Europe and the US, but I've always thought Giorgia Meloni was a better bet. What do you think?
Well, good evening. Well, I think that Giorgia Meloni for sure can have a role within the EU, which obviously Keir Starmer can't have. And also it depends on what kind of issues we are talking about. I think that the UK obviously can leverage the very strong ties that the Foreign Office has with Washington, and it can have a role especially on the issue of Ukraine, being at the forefront of this coalition of the willing, while Italy, due also to its low defense spending and its low key profile on Ukraine in recent months, is less likely to have a role in that, a prominent role. While on tariffs, for sure, this is a key kind of issue for Italy. And here, like Giorgia Meloni can try to leverage what has been described as a very special relationship with Donald Trump to try to facilitate dialogue between Washington and Brussels.
And so what do you think Giorgia Meloni would count as a win from this meeting?
She made it very clear that she's not going to try to negotiate a bilateral sort of agreement, nor is she going to have any formal mandate to negotiate on behalf of the EU. So that is not what is on the table today. She is possibly trying to persuade Donald Trump to have a dialogue directly with the European Commission and Ursula von der Leyen specifically. The White House under Trump so far has been quite reluctant to engage with EU institutions as such, preferring to dialogue bilaterally with European leaders. I think that Giorgia Meloni would like to try to facilitate this sort of dialogue directly between Trump and von der Leyen. And the best result that she can achieve today is to get to the point where there is a statement also from the White House that somehow acknowledges this sort of perspective.
All right, so those of her European partners who were perhaps worried about Giorgia Meloni going to Washington and getting some sort of sweetheart deal for Italy, it sounds like you think that's not what she's about.
Yeah, it has been said that this is not what is going to happen. It's quite clear that the European Commission has the authority to negotiate tariffs on behalf of member states. So it makes no sense for Italy to try to get some sort of exemption or to negotiate bilaterally. Also bear in mind that however important the US market for Italian export is, this amounts to about 10% of Italian export. More than 50% goes to the other European EU countries. So it doesn't make sense to jeopardize the EU common market just to get some kind of short-term deal with Washington.
Right.
And I think that Giorgia Meloni is well aware of that.
All right, good talking to you. Thanks for talking us through that so clearly. Leo Goretti from the Istituto Affari Internazionali. Thank you so much.
Thank you.